I know I'm going to survive death, so I'm just going to off myself and then go experience other dimensions. That's a notion that occurs to people under electric conditions. Well, the effects of electricity have been how people have lived in the last 100 years and basically experienced a decentralization of all kinds of things because there wasn't such a visible center for electricity. Centers were everywhere. So the precise positioning of oneself in society, in organizations, got diminished and became vague. I mean, that's why the mafia could take over 100 years ago. They could bypass the police structures with their telephones and other forms of electronic communication. The Android meme then replayed that for machines. So machines started to get decentralized. Cold fusion brings in a decentralism where you don't have to keep paying for it. You got eternal electricity, endless supplies. So the bureaucratic control of the power source is diminished with Coldplay. It's still a decentralized electric effect, but it's really frees you from bureaucracy of payment for power, payment for energy in your home. That's right, and if you could afford it, hospitals could keep you alive. You know, they could technically keep you alive forever. Now, you're not functioning. Let's say you're alive, and they could feed digital information into this 99% dead body, but just being kept alive by circuitry. How do we know that being inside is not registering the data that's going in there? I mean, there is, from the Evergreens, the recording of the kid in 2078, 100 years from when this session was done in 1978. The kid thinks he has a whole life. He's 14 years old, and he thinks he travels, he thinks he has a girlfriend, blah, 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 and all this stuff, and he hasn't got any of it. It's all just in the matrix tube. It's not less real, But his chemical body is not experiencing that. His brain is experiencing that whole life. And that was a new level of experience that was coming in 2078 that the Evergreens predicted. So, yes, you can. So, the idea that you die and then death is the end of everything. That's not true in terms of digital terms. The rest of your bodies continue. So you can't. So the atheists who say no, you don't survive death. Well, only your chemical body doesn't survive death. Other parts of yourself does. And then there, once you relax on that point, you might say, well, maybe there is more than this life for the chemical body, which is actually the astral body. So there's more and more people willing to see that the chemical body is not a finite experience, because it is not the main part of our experience. We can now turn it into an art form and believe that we're eternal in the chemical body, or that at least we survive death. And then people like to more and more think that they reincarnate. So the electric environment is part of the second coming that spiritualized humanity into not being so frightened at the short, brutish life their chemical body had. It also creates the indifference to the chemical body, so more and more suicides. I know I'm going to survive death, so I'm just going to off myself and then go experience other dimensions. That's a notion that occurs to people under electric conditions. So hallelujah to the second coming. Finnegan's awake. Yeah. You know the story. It's a song about a guy. He's a construction person. I think they call him a hod carrier. So he's doing construction, and he falls off the ladder and dies, and they bury him. They put him he's on display at the wake in a coffin, and it's an open coffin. And so the Irish are celebrating, Irish Americans apparently, it's an Irish American song, and they're celebrating this guy, and some of the whiskey, either the bottle hits the corpse head, or whiskey pours on the head, I'm not sure which it is, and it awakens the corpse. So he becomes alive because of the bump on his head or the drink splattering on his face. And so it's a metaphor for the second coming. He survived death. So that's a joke that Finnegan's Wake is built on, this accidental retrieval of a person's life. And then that becomes a metaphor for all kinds of metaphysics and cultural interpretations of death. That accidental retrieval of the corpse becoming alive, that joke becomes an archetypal meme for Joyce to do the whole history of culture and technology from that, right? Right. So the humans, when they use speech and address chemical bodies, and you can't address chemical bodies anymore because there's always someone taping you. So, anyways, the new ministers at funerals have to say, "We are gathered here to witness the passing of Roxana Flores. Roxana passed on, but we have 4 million YouTubes of herself in our hard drive. So only 1/5 of Roxana disappeared when she committed suicide and off her chemical body. We're only mourning the loss of 1/5 of Roxana. We got a lot of Roxana here we can gauge forever." That's how you would do a modern funeral. Right? You have to point out to people, I can interact with Roxana on all the tape archives I have, which is just as real as if I was in person with her. And the media is going to get more and more intimate, so you'll be able to do all kinds of things with the hard drive reservoir, as much as you could do with the chemical body. So yes, the priests have to say, we lost 1/5 of Roxana. And that's all. What happens is that a new environment will upset the older environment, and you will notice conflict in the older environment. And aggravation, usually a war breaks out. That's a sign there's a new medium afoot. a new invisible technology creating a new space. That's where the conflict happens. Oh yeah, yeah. He was. Don Thiel has spoken on committees in government context about censorship. He's probably seen as an anti-censorship guy, but he states in his book Beyond the Word, he makes the case that you require the obscene or the ugly in society because that's the means for new expression. So that would translate back to violence means finding a new identity, and in the process, you create new wealth. So the actual wealth-making process of our societies is a very violent act because everybody's forced to cross boundaries and translate their purpose into another medium's purpose because that other medium has got you under surveillance. So there's constant communication and interaction and translation, and it may appear violent, but it is also the way new expression, new wealth is created. So war is not necessarily just nations fighting each other over territories. War is your daily activity. Just like McLuhan said, espionage is our daily activity. When you get on there in some service environment and start having engaged the economy and other media, it upsets other media. So there has to be constant emailing, texting, phoning to check out the reactions of who you're affecting. So that would be Baudrillard's ecstasy of communication. Constant monitoring, checking, what are the effects of what you're doing? So that the violence of your action doesn't get totally misinterpreted, and then you're arrested. People do not see typing as violence. They don't see the communication of digital life as an act of violence. But you do see in the poorer countries, the countries that aren't technologized, they register what we're doing as violence. You can see in those more forlorn, off-the-grid cultures, the desperation of their lifestyles is an expression of their victimization by the violence of our advanced technologies. It used to be the third world, the undeveloped world was starving. Now it is ransacked by guerrilla and gang warfare. One's image of many countries in the world that aren't advanced industrially or software-wise are engaged in militarization of gang warfare. A lot of McLuhan's work is a satire, and he said a Manippian satire which satirized the surfaces of life. So if you actually go into what a percept is versus what a concept is, go into it in depth, you probably end up in the same spot, and you'd have to say there's not much of a difference. Or the difference is so subtle, they don't know why McLuhan makes a big deal of it. But on the surface, McLuhan said, our direct experience of the new is percept, referring our new experience back to what we knew before, what we've categorized, what we remember is concept. Concepts, in simple terms, is your direct experience. Somehow we start replaying those experiences as an afterimage or a thought or memory. So concepts might be memory. Percepts is a sensory experience, and then you're reflecting on them as concepts. Now, some people say that there's no real difference between percept and concept, that you can't have the pure perceptual versus the pure conceptual. But McLuhan made a point of playing down what people had to say or think about their experiences, because usually their concepts or categories were referring to the past, to the familiar. And a percept is usually something new. It's the next moment. And it hasn't been categorized yet. So translation is conceptual for many people. But our senses are translating all the time in direct perceptual experience. Right, and when he says when you say translate it into objects, the newer kinds of objects, the electric circuitry, are not so object-like or hardware. The new objects are software processes, what he called circuitry, the flows of circuitry. It's not an object. A telephone conversation electrified is not an object, but it could be called an object. But usually people think of objects as what you can see, but you can't see a telephone conversation. You can see the phone you're using, but you are engaging in another level of process. So you have to be careful when you talk about objects. So percept would be simply your sensory life, and then the concept would be your mental life. So that split isn't too healthy, but McLuhan put on the split, like he said about fitting his wake. Joyce made a whole universe out of two words. Electric media, a book doesn't seem to possess people. So McLuhan would take any two words, eye, ear, visual and acoustic, percept and concept, cliche to archetype, and include hendiades, one by means of two, but also play up the differences. or create differences. So he'd set up a straw man of a dialectic and then try to get you to notice that something else permeates the dialectic, collapses it, maybe even synthesizes it. But probably at the time when books came in, some people became great readers. And other people who didn't read as much probably thought that that excessive act of reading by a particular individual, his appetite for reading probably looked pretty perverted. It looked pretty antisocial. So they could say, that guy got possessed by the book. Well, every subsequent media environment moving into the software world possesses whole populations and eventually the whole planet. And so this possession, this when media are extensions of our faculties, those extended faculties numb us. So the numbing part that McLuhan talked about. So then it becomes a habit and a cliche. So you've adopted a new appetite and you're unaware of it. You've gotten used to it, and that's kind of being possessed by an extension. So when The Exorcist came out in 1973, McLuhan said that that affected people. People responded to the imagery in it, and panicked and ran out of theaters and all kinds of excitement, just like when Stravinsky did The Rite of Spring, in 1913 in Paris, it caused a riot. There was a riot going on psychically among consumers of that movie, and McLuhan immediately nailed the pattern brilliantly and said, The Exorcist affects people deeply because it's an actual mirror of what electric media are doing to people. People are feeling they're getting possessed by the 70s. Because the electronic vortex, the global theater, was just getting bigger and bigger beyond people's humanist values or cultural values. So yes, um, the occult idea of the walk-in um, was what people were experiencing. They were being collectively they were being walked into by the electronic environment. And then later the Android meme.
By you.
I imitated the walking in of the Android meme. So I used to get on CKLN in the 80s and with some DJ, some guy who worked there, he liked me and had me on a show, and I would say, I will, in the course of us having 20 minutes or an hour together, I will kill you. And how I killed him is I would start talking, maybe something like this, and they would get an insight. I'm actually pretty good at making clear the insight about the new. And they go, oh, I got it, I get it. And right then I pounce on them. See, I changed you. I gave you a new image, which can now be part of your new self. You've made a new self in yourself. I killed your old self. And they would have to admit that I, quote, killed them. So I possessed them with my ability to communicate. They got the insight. They're all happy to have the insight. They didn't know that they wanted and they had an appetite for an insight. They wanted to have the delight of it. And when they got it, I immediately satirized, you got fooled by my wonderful cookie I gave you. You're now addicted to Bob Insights because you just had one. Sort of like losing your virginity.
Losing your virginity to the discarnate penis.
My discarnate penis just that's why by August 1987, I've been on the air. August 17th was the harmonic convergence, and I've been on the air for 2 months. And that we already, considering the insights I generated temporarily in people, they don't last. These insights, they want more insights later. Within 2 months, I had de-virginized people. So I made the term harmonic convergence. We call it harmonic Bob virgins. So every caller is a new virgin. And it's not a chemical body de-virginization, deflowering. It is an effect of electronic interaction that creates the ecstasy of a new pattern. And you could say that's mind. I was changing people's minds, but more, you're not changing people because you're just giving them a new pattern that people are delighted to have. And McLuhan said pattern recognition took over in the 20th century. But by 1974, McLuhan said people were addicted to pattern recognition. That's why people turn on the media every day. They want to hear and get a pattern, as well as share the discarnate space. Yes, and it's part of looking for a new image, a new identity. Nobody knows what the enemy is, so everybody becomes enemy, and everybody's forced to probe and check out everybody else to see if they are enemy or not. So the major confusion of our time is the inability to focus on why there's an enemy, who the enemy is, and what they're up to. Because the Android meme is so subtle, it creates conflict in every form of social organization. incredible across the board, like previous media. But it's also creating conflict among the machines itself. So um, the chemical body becomes a threat, a menace. And so surveillance must be made over everybody, because anybody could potentially be an aggressive act, because there's so much decentralization that the disservice of everybody becoming empowered is that that means that they're empowered to create a lot of violence, a lot of destruction. So total paranoia comes in. Total paranoia. So yes, me is a discarnate. The Android meme is a discarnate penis. It probes people. It also could be a discarnate vagina because it sucks people in. And so you go inside it. So the whole sexual process is mimed by the Android meme. And that can be politely discussed as tactility, the tactile. So I was the first person to discuss the effect of myself in sexual terms on the air. And there was this journalist at that time, Adam McGoyan, made that movie Sex, Lies, and Videotape. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, in the late 80s. And when that movie came out in the late 80s by a Toronto filmmaker, Adam McGoyan, a regular listener to my show, who was a Toronto journalist, was shocked. Holy, this is what Bob's talking about. Actually, what I was saying, which was old McLuhan stuff, communicated effect. He didn't know what I meant when I was using words, but when he saw a movie version of it through Sex, Lies, and Videotape, he understood the discarnate eroticism. So then he understood what I meant by discarnate penis. But it took that movie for him to see, to quote, see it. And I've said that the American, and that includes the North American, is a kinetically biased culture. Visual and kinetic. The kinetic part is seen through the dances and the sports. The kinetic bias. Oh, yes. So I said because movies are an extension of the kinetic bias, the kinetic sense, and that is the core medium experience of North Americans. The truth of particular issues, the literal truth, the literate truth, the factual truth, communicates through the movie medium. So when Oliver Stone made JFK in 1991 or so, he showed the facts that the researchers have put together for years and published many books, and the American populace wasn't interested in these books and the facts that were in the books. But when they saw the movie, they saw presented in the kinetic bias of the movie extension. It was real to them. They saw the point that the people disagreed with the Warren Commission conclusion. And it was so powerful, Congress was forced to change the rules about the releasing of the hidden Warren Commission files, or the locked away files. It took the movie medium to do it. Because that was the medium a kinetic society responds to. So here's this guy in Toronto, he saw Sex, Lies, and Videotape trying to show the discarnate effect of people having sex through video. When he saw it in the movie medium, it had the effect of appearing to be truthful to him. Then he knew what I was talking about. Right. See, so that's because media pointed out, McLuhan pointed out that media were nature. By saying they were nature, he meant they're real, they're physical, they add to nature. There is no virtual reality if you think that means, oh, it's not real, it's virtual. What it means is it's not real chemical body nature, it's real electrified nature. So there is no virtual reality if you think virtual means it's fake. You're shocked that you see and know about Mexico through TV. You think that TV is not as real as actually being there in your chemical body. It is as real. You are living in Mexico when you're watching the footage. Now, maybe on the editorial part about did I see all of the city of Mexico during that protest? No, you didn't see every aspect, but whatever you did see is part of your sensory life. So it's not unreal to live in Mexico while you're living in Berlin. Saw people running around videotaping him burning, and we're standing back in a specialized mode, and we're watching the action of burning, which we've never seen before. I haven't seen a guy burn himself right in front of me and run around the area and then collapse. They were translating into it another part of reality. It's not wrong. It's not an illusion what they were doing. They were just translating it into their chip body. And they weren't responding to the chemical body at the moment. They were involved in registering the chemical body reality that was burning into their digital reality. There is no virtual reality in the sense of fake reality. All media are real, but to the degree that you're embedded in them and can't see through them and realize, we don't want to say they're unreality, you just realize that you've been specialized and fragmented into emphasizing your digital tactile sense. And you've lost access to other senses, earlier senses. That's why, the holograms are coming in and they are real. That's McLuhan's point. They're so real, populations should turn them off. It's like having a constant rainstorm going on. You have a culture, and you live in this island or someplace, and it's raining 24/7 for 6 years. That disrupts the ecology of people functioning. They can't grow food, they can't have seasons. So if you have constant TV, that's constant nature, a storm, raining happening in your society, and you can't get the book stuff done. You can't get the other media done. You don't have a proper balanced cycling of a media diet, or what is called the balanced doctrine of analogical proportionality. You're out of sync. You're stuck in one modality. So there's never been any false reality, other than should be trained by the shaman to see through that it is not the whole story. And the alternative to any media environment is not the whole story either, but it is a way of looking at the story you're embedded in. So Tom Waits said, I never saw the East Coast till I went to the West Coast. I never saw the West Coast till I went to the East Coast. It's an old lyric of a song in the 70s. It's an example of what metaphors do. They translate us. And so we like to talk to someone else through the simple medium of speech, which is not a fake medium, and it translates me through you to see myself. And all subsequent media are like the action of words and speech. They're translators. And we did a whole video on translation. So see that one. Now it might make more sense in light of what I just said. End of story. Good night.
Right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm awake now.